Life is complicated, or at least that's how it feels. We fill our days, stretch our limits, chase more, carry more, and then wonder why we end up burned out, stretched thin, and just trying to keep up. But what if the problem isn't life? What if we've just complicated what was never meant to be? This is It's Complicated, a series about cutting through the noise, getting back to what matters most, and rediscovering the simplicity of a life grounded in faith, family, and purpose. Each episode, I'll take one area of life that feels tangled, expose the lie that's keeping it that way, and bring it back to truth. Because clarity brings peace. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to be complicated. Let's get into it. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to the studio on the Sunday afternoon. I've just had a delightful latte, catching a little bit of the motorsport overload for me this weekend. So plenty going on. Watching it in all parts of the world and enjoying it, but wanted to spend some time with you this afternoon in this series that we're doing called It's Complicated. And I think the whole point of this, I hope you're getting it, is that we make life more complicated than God intended we would, and we add when I think the message from God in this season is to take away. That is, less is more. And so I want to speak about that today. And in this series, you know, I've been speaking about topics like faith and finances and family. Focus was the recent one. And then today, I want to talk about fulfillment. And so I'm looking forward to getting into that with you. Been roasting some new beans recently, different beans from a different continent, and I just want to say that the testing is going well, and I won't report until I've got something substantial to report to you. But just for a little bit of coffee geek moment, I found some fruity beans in the pantry at the lake this weekend, and they're sealed airtight in a what do you call those things, like a little glass jar. And so, you know, super fresh. Got them out, ground them by hand. That's how I do the pour over when I'm at the lake, and got the temperature of the boiled water down to 92 degrees. Let it bloom in the filter, and then drip the coffee into the cup. And oh my gosh, just so smooth. Just what a beautiful way to spend the late afternoon, sitting in the late afternoon autumn sun. Absolutely delightful this time of year, with the colours of the leaves changing colour, and birds and the sounds, and just the stillness of the afternoon, and enjoying the smooth on the palate of just that drip coffee. So just an absolute geek moment I was having on the weekend, both on a Friday and on Saturday afternoons just gone. So yeah, you're welcome. I'm happy to share that with you. Hey, let's get into this episode. I've got to say to you, though, to be super transparent here, really honest, I nearly didn't record this episode this afternoon. Not to be dramatic. Life's not falling apart, but just tired, you know, and I think that's really what pointed me to this content. Was, you know, the tiredness is a symptom. And what is it a symptom of? That's what I want to get into today, because I think what I'm in the bad habit of doing, and I don't know about you, but we build our lives to be constantly full. And they're really fulfilling. Not often. Not often is a full life fulfilling. And that's the real truth. And that lands close to home, and that lands hard for me. And so when I say we've made life complicated, more complex than God ever intended, we've added and we've added and we've added, and that's not the simple life of faith that God intends for us. And so I want to get back into that thought today. Look, I know that I've shared this kind of theme and flavor before in different episodes over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, but I just keep coming back to it, and the question is, what is it that brings us to that place of exhaustion, or just feeling a bit ho-ha, life is, oh man, there's a lot, this is heavy. And so I've been reflecting on that, and I'm just wondering, I've made a list here, and I've made a list not as a full confession of my world, but I thought, what is it that is in my life, but also in other lives, and I wonder what's making it overloaded, and there's this like repeated theme. There's a dull ache that I hear in people as we spend time together and we share our lives together, and that the calendar is always full. We don't tend to take things out of our calendar as much as we put things in. We're constantly on the go. Like, when was the last time you had 3 days in a row where you sat around doing nothing and not feeling guilty for it? I think we can get busy and overloaded and lots of people, but we miss the joy of the moment, because while we're living this moment with the people in front of us, we're thinking about the next moment with the next people we're connecting with, and the next event that's in the calendar, and we miss the joy of the moment. And that's really what I was trying to get to in the previous episode, Coffee with Phil, episode 165, where I was speaking about us complicating our focus, and you can go back and listen to that again. I think the lack of joy, or the low levels of joy in the moment, means the noise that's going around us is what's stealing our peace. And we think that resting is scrolling. We think taking time out is just doom scrolling, or worse than that, binging on stuff that's actually not helpful, like just the wrong kind of content. This next one is a confession of mine, and I kind of feel like sometimes in this space I'll want to double down and accomplish more, and so I want to push out some more episodes, or I've got this new book idea in my head, and I'm literally trying to force it to the back of my mind, because I don't really need another book project right now. I've got several on the go. The latest book, What You See Matters, I think it's on my website. I'm pretty sure I put it back up there. But what I want to do is actually record the audio book, because I'm finding that people are preferring those more to a book to read. And so what I'm saying is I miss the restful moments, because I'm doubling down on the accomplishment. And look, I don't know what that's like for you, but I really am, I suppose, being a bit honest here and saying, are we going to do anything about it? We thought, here's the clincher, guys, lean into this one. We thought fulfillment would come from achieving more, but many of us are more productive than ever, and yet more empty than ever. And so here's the punch in the face part before we get on to some good stuff. And that's, friends, I think the honest truth is fulfillment is not found in more success, more money, more hype, more recognition, more hustle, more opportunities, more fame, more followers, more clicks, more likes, more upsales. Look, I wanted to brainstorm on the back of that what would lead us to a greater level of fulfillment. So I sat down and thought about what are the times in my life where I felt really fulfilled. And to be honest with you, it comes back to being in alignment with what God is doing in the now, without being stressed of pushing forward to the future. And I wrote a chapter in the book Limbo Land about being in the sandstorm and having to follow in the rabbi's footsteps. And to do that, you've got to stay close, because in the sandstorm, the sand and the wind whip across the desert, and you lose sight of where the last footprint was. So you have to stay close so that you just take one step at a time. And I use that analogy to describe what I mean by alignment with the rabbi, following in Jesus' footprints. He says in John 10 that his sheep know his voice and they hear him and follow him. So fulfillment is definitely found in alignment. For me, fulfillment is definitely found in doing what's obedient to what God has already said to me. And I think often we're guilty of looking for the next thing to do. And I feel like the Holy Spirit often says to people, if only they'd listen, hey, look, I'm not giving you something new to do because you didn't do the last thing I gave you to do. And that's where obedience really is what where the rubber hits the road for me. So I just want to give you one more in this list, and that's presence. And by that I mean the presence of him who is always near to us, but often we're not connected to the reality of his presence. God is omnipresent. He's always present. He's always in our lives, but we don't often connect with that. So I'd suggest to you that fulfillment is found in alignment, following in his footsteps, obedience, doing the last thing that he told you to do, and connecting with his presence. And I think if we start with the presence, we'll find alignment. If we find alignment, we'll definitely find obedience. And then flowing out of that, friends, the complication drops away because we find peace and we find purpose, and that leads us to fulfillment. And really that's the big truth that I want to drive home in this episode, is that we dial it back and go, what, like, I love the people around me. I love doing life with them. Are there moments where I feel empty or alone? Are there aspects of my life where I feel I'm really missing the mark? And then we dial it back. We go, okay, well, let me just find the way to find fulfillment. And I think there's a lot of empty people in the world. I think there's a lot of people just realizing that what they were doing wasn't getting them where, let's just say, people spending a lot of energy and time and money on things that are not delivering fulfillment. So I hope you're being as challenged in this as I am, because there's a couple of other things that I want to pull into in this. And so why don't you hang out with me just for the next 20 minutes, and let's really lean into this idea that life is complicated. We've possibly, most likely, made life way more complicated than God ever intended because we've added to it. We've pushed the boundaries beyond what was the design of human nature, and we've added, and we wonder why we're empty and drained. And that is the synopsis of lacking fulfillment. So let's dig into this a little bit more. I'm going to have a pause. I'm going to rest. I'm going to come back, and we're going to charge into the next part. I want to give you an analogy that might help some of you with grasping, I suppose, what's going on here. I've been having some technical difficulties in my office at home lately, and I've realized just on reflection and trying to refine a few of the tools and the systems that I use, but I realized that the iMac, the big computer on my desk, I realized that it's getting old, and like it was secondhand when I bought it, and I bought it maybe 6 years ago. So I'm thinking this is about 10 or 11 years old, this machine. I think it's 2015, so what's that, 11 years old. And it doesn't have the ability to upgrade to some of the new operating systems, but it also doesn't have the ability to keep up with the way that the software is requiring the memory and stuff. And look, I'm not even a computer geek, so I might be saying that wrong, but the point is, I'm trying to use my computer that I have beyond its capacity, and I'm trying to get it to multitask in ways that it can't actually do it. And so I want you to think about that in your life. The the old cliche is true. You know, how many tabs do you have open in your browser? Which one is playing music, and which one are you looking at? And they're probably all different things, you know. I have multiple tabs open on multiple windows on several different browsers, and I wonder why my computer's struggling. The point I'm making is that's what we do with our lives. And I remember, if you go back maybe 3 years to the podcast series I was doing back then around, you know, burning the candle at both ends and dealing with burnout and the leader's guide to coming out of that space, what I realized the most out of my season of burnout was that I was trying to live my life with 3% battery. And, you know, if you looked at your phone or your watch or your tablet and it had a 3% battery life, you're going to put the charger on, and you're best, if you do, to leave it there to charge before you use it, right? But what about our lives? You know, if you're running your life on 3% battery and you're wondering why you're irritated, tired, or exhausted and nothing is fulfilling, it's because your battery's low. And how does the logic, or the lack of logic, of adding more and more to our lives, how is that going to help you find a life of fulfillment? It's not. So I want to jump across to scripture here. The most famous guy that lamented and wrote about this was, of course, King Solomon, son of David. God said, ask for anything you want, and he actually asked for wisdom, and God said, well, because you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you everything else that you didn't ask for. Incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful, lived a life of peace, no battles, nation of Israel under his kingship just saw immense favor. But I love the way he comes to, so in Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 9, good reading for later on. He says, I became great, and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in my toil, and this was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, it was all vanity, and a striving after the wind, and there was nothing else to be gained under the sun. What he's saying here is, I worked hard and I succeeded and I had everything I wanted, and yet when I looked at it, I realized that it was nothing. It was like grasping at the wind, and it was worth nothing to me at the end of the day. This was my portion, and there was no profit in it for me. So let's summarize that into modern language. Solomon's basically saying, I tried everything. I built everything. I owned everything. I experienced everything and enjoyed what I wanted, and yet I am still empty. There's a line in my book, Building a Strong Family, in the introduction, because a friend of mine who wrote the introduction, we spoke about the journey that got me to, I suppose, the climax that led to the stories in the book. And we realized that I had spent my life climbing the ladder of success, got quite high on that ladder, only to realize that I'd leaned that ladder against the wrong wall. And it was a realization for me, because I was expending my effort, my passion and my time and my energy to build something that I thought I was building for my family. And I realized that what I was building was my empire, and that it had nothing to do with my family. I climbed the ladder of success to find out that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. And that's what Solomon is saying here. I tried it all. I built it all. I owned it all. I had it all for my pleasure, and I was empty. Jesus says it in a different way in Mark chapter 8, and he says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul. It's a crazy thing. And in the context of that, he's, just for those of you that don't remember, he's speaking about those that would deny their lives, take up their cross, and follow him. For whoever would save his life would lose it, and whoever loses life would gain it. The point being, what's actually more important in life is how we pursue the things that Jesus would have us pursue. So friends, I think the obvious truth here is the fulfillment doesn't come from adding more to our lives. Lean in, listen, this is the key. This is the whole point, I think, of my thoughts that are coming around circle today. Fulfillment comes from removing what doesn't matter. I'll say it again. Lean in, don't miss it. Fulfillment doesn't come from adding more. Fulfillment comes from removing what does not matter. And in my life, I'm thinking, what matters? You know, what matters to me? What matters to our family? What's important? It's not more followers of the podcast. It's not extending my influence into other cities and nations and bigger platforms. The tension for me, and I'm being really honest, is I actually love the thrill of that. Like, I love the thrill of going into a new place and working with a new bunch of people or a new culture or, big stage and working with a lot more people. Like, I get a thrill out of that, but it's not the most important thing to me. You know, some of the quiet conversations I've had in the back of a bus with a translator in Indonesia, where I've been able to speak life and hope and purpose into someone, that's of way more value in the kingdom. You know, rather than upgrade my life, what if I could just speak more deeply into one life? You know, how do I strip away the things that don't matter to find the peace that I'm desperate for? How do I remove the clutter from my calendar to find more time for stillness? You know, one of the things that I've learned as a discipline that I won't allow anyone to steal from me is I block time in my calendar for stillness. I have to, because if I'm not in control of my time, other people will take control of it. So what are you doing to make sure that you put into your life moments of stillness? The Bible, the Gospels especially, specifically say to us that Jesus would often take himself away from his friends to spend time with his Father. He would take time in isolation. He would take time for prayer. And the Gospels are clear that he was going to pray. Now, what is prayer? Prayer is dialogue. With whom? The Father. So we're praying in the Spirit, God the Spirit, with God the Father. We're in dialogue. He speaks, we listen. We speak, he listens. That's what prayer is, friends. And Jesus showed us how important it was to prioritize that. Well, what about you? Are you prioritizing that? We've taken time lately to increase the amount of family time we have. And, you know, I've got adult kids and they're both, married and moving on with lives and got all sorts of stuff happening. But even this afternoon, we accidentally ended up sharing lunch together. It was kind of like hey, let's get the stuff from the supermarket and do this on the floor. It was fun. Someone else turned up. We had a time of prayer that was spontaneous. We didn't expect that, but it was just filled with fulfillment. It truly was. This is how I want my life to be. But if I don't prioritize that, it doesn't happen. And in it, I'm finding the joy that comes from prioritizing it and recognizing that the fulfillment that I'm absolutely thirsting for is found in those moments. And they're not like high experience memory moments. They're just little bit by little bit. They're building something into our lives and our family that is fulfilling. It truly is. And from that fulfillment, you find the joy and the peace that comes. So I encourage you to think about those things. The tyranny of more is something that we got to strip away. And so for you, it's about thinking, what's your tyranny of more? What is it that's dragging in your life? What is dragging focus and fulfillment away from what's truly important to you and what truly matters to you? And what are you going to do about it? Like, I can sit here and like encourage you, but I'm not sitting there and actually telling you to do it, making you do it. So you've got to think about that, to find the peace, to find the still moments, to find the time for prayer and time for what you want to prioritize. So don't be successful in the wrong things. Like I've seen people build big platforms. I've seen people build big businesses. I've seen people have access to more money than they'd ever need, and yet they still neglect their faith. They neglect their soul, their emotional health. They might neglect their marriage or their family, or they might just completely miss the mark with who God's inviting them to be. You know, the greatest assignment in our lives, I believe, is to come to know God and discover why He made us the way He did, that we would reflect who He is through His design for our lives. It's the greatest purpose in life, and I think you'll find fulfillment in that. So if you've deviated from it, come back to that path. If you've got other priorities, get ruthless and cut them out, man. Again, episode after episode, I've shared with you where I've actually been really ruthless in just carving stuff out of my life because it just wasn't where I was going to find fulfillment. So let me finish perhaps with some key questions. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I've got these written down here, so I'm going to paste them into the description of the podcast so that you can find them. But I would urge you to perhaps come back and play this again and write them in your journal or make a note on your phone so that you can reflect on them and really have a serious conversation with yourself about these questions. And I want you to be honest with these questions. And look, you and the Holy Spirit are the only ones that are going to know if you're really, really being honest. So you do you, all right? But here we go. Here's a gentle but strong challenge at the end of our time together today. Ask yourself this: what am I chasing? Think about it. And if you don't know, look at your diary, look at your focus points, look at where all your energy goes. What is it that I'm chasing? And then the second question on that, this is challenging. Who told me that this mattered? In a healing ministry, we often ask a question, who was it that first helped me to believe this to be true? Because sometimes we believe a mistruth, and the belief that we put in the mistruth misguides us, misaligns us, and that's why we miss the mark, right? So look, it could just be a false belief that was part of family, or it was something that we took away from a moment of correction or a moment of trauma that allowed us to believe the mistruth that then misguided us. But what was going on when I learned that this was true for me? Who told me this mattered? So question number 1, what am I chasing? Question number 2, who told me this mattered? And thirdly, here's a question for you. What would life look like if I was moving more slowly, and would I be more healthy? What would life look like if I was moving more slowly, and would I be more healthy? Now, friends, when I speak about health, I'm speaking about the triparts of our nature: mind, body, and spirit. So we think about, would I be more healthy in my emotions? Would I be emotionally healthy, emotionally strong? Would I be emotionally vibrant? Spiritually, we can have a dull spiritual life. We can have a dead spiritual life. We can have a diverted spiritual life. But true spiritual health is being one with God and knowing that we are one with Him, as Jesus had prayed for us in John 17. Would I be more spiritually healthy, perhaps if I invested my time in other things? And then also physically, the body affects all things. So would I be more physically healthy if life was slower? And finally, the final question, number 4 here is, what if God isn't asking me to do more, but trust him more? What if God isn't asking me to do more, but to trust him more? Friends, maybe fulfillment isn't found at the top of a mountain. Maybe it's found in finally walking with God in the valley. Think about that. So, your homework for this week, as I leave you to go. This week, remove one thing. Go on a dare to. Is it a commitment? Is it a distraction? Perhaps it's a device or an app on a device that is really cluttering your life. Is it a pressure, an expectation you're carrying? Is it a yes that you gave someone when you shouldn't have done that? And then find the one that wants to speak to you when the noise leaves. I'll leave that with you. God bless you, friends. I'll be back with you soon.